Now for our final one-on-one CEO panel, we have the CEO of India's biggest airline and who also has almost 1,000 aircraft on order. Please welcome on stage Mr. Pieter Elbers, the CEO of IndiGo. Thank you. Pieter, thank you for joining us on stage. Now, tell us a little bit about your mission. You know, this is about IndiGo connecting to the world, and you have a lot of aircraft due delivery in the next 10 years, and you're building the blocks already, you know, with over 300 aircraft. What are you trying to do at the moment, and how you get to then eventually over 1,000 aircraft?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Danny, and good morning, everyone. You know, India today is probably one of the most underserved markets in the world, and we could hear Tony speaking about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But to some parallel, there's a similar situation in India where the amount and the percentage of people with a passport is still relatively limited. The amount of people having access to air travel is still relatively limited. And I would say IndiGo, over the past 17 years, has done a wonderful job in giving air travel access to millions and millions of Indians. So last year, the calendar year 23, we welcomed 100 million customers on board of our flights. And in a single year, the year prior, it was still 78 million. So that speaks about the potential of growth in the market itself. Having said that, the outlook actually is very optimistic, and hand in hand with the growth of India and the GDP growth of India, we can see a very steady growth going forward, and clearly IndiGo wants to continue to play a part of that, both domestic and I would say even more so international. So today we operate a little over 300 aircraft.
2,000 flights a day.
Yeah, that's a big number. We moved up actually in 1 year from 1,600 flights a day to over 2,000 a day. And again there, we're probably a carrier with a very diverse network. So we do operate 19 flights a day between Delhi and Bombay, and we operate 1 flight a day between Delhi and Jaisalmer. So that network really speaks to the potential of the country and the huge differences between the different cities in the country itself. We expect that that number will just continue to grow going forward.
You have barely scratched the surface, but talk to us more about the India by IndiGo theme, because clearly it's not just about building up the domestic network, which you have an incredible market share, but it's that untapped potential of serving many, many connections. I mean, you've got over 30 international destinations at the moment, and you could go from many hubs ultimately.
Well, we proudly call it giving wings to the nation. And think about that. When you're going from Mumbai to Bihar, up in the northeast, it would classically take people up to 24 hours by train. Today, it's a 2-hour flight, and that is giving air access and air travel possibilities. And what that does to local economies is just wonderful. And we see that both domestic as well as international. And I mean, sticking to the topic of Thailand, we just introduced actually yesterday our first flights from Hyderabad into Bangkok. So today we have a little over 400 routes domestic, some 100 international routes. We've added a total of 100 routes over the last year. And there's great opportunities. I mean, even Singapore itself, where we are here today, we do fly now out of 8 different cities in India into Singapore, a little short of 60 flights a week, and that number will just continue to grow going forward.
And last year you grew by 20% in terms of capacity. Of course, you're currently in the fiscal fourth quarter, but when you look to the next fiscal full year, how much growth could we expect to see from IndiGo?
Well, we haven't given yet any capacity guidance for the next year. I think what's important is, despite some of the headwinds we had in terms of supply chain challenges, we have been able to live up, due to a whole range of measures, we have been able to live up to our capacity guidance. And indeed, we're able to have a 20+% growth over last year. And that has enabled us to reach that fantastic milestone of 100 million customers a year. And think about that. Think about the number of airlines who are welcoming 100 million customers a year, and the very short time span, just 17 years. I don't think there's any airline in the world who has achieved that passenger number and that size really in such a short time frame as only 17 years. So we continue to grow. Our order book is a wonderful and fantastic asset really.
One
because we
aircraft a week.
For the next decade.
Yep.
It's not for the next year or the next 2 years, for the next decade. And that really helps us to have very good discussions with I would say, the aviation ecosystem in India, because we know the number of planes we're getting for the next decade. That is really helping us to have good discussions with the airports, what infrastructure we need, what air traffic control do we need, what transfer facilities do we need. And I think that whole ecosystem in India is developing, and Campbell mentioned it in his introduction this morning. That whole ecosystem in India is just moving to where I think it's the rightful place. If home is the most populous nation on planet Earth, if home is the third largest economy in the world, soon third largest economy in the world, then you need to have an aviation ecosystem matching that size and scale. And India is an incredible, ambitious nation moving forward, and aviation is a very integral part of it.
And of course, the untapped potential, which you as a low-cost carrier are unlocking by making fares really low and making travel more affordable as well.
Absolutely, and I think the number of stations opened, and you see the economic impact, and some of the cities which had little air connectivity in the past are having significant air connectivity now. You see what's happening, and one would tend to look at the big metros in India, in Delhi, in Mumbai, Hyderabad, and Chennai or Madras. But there's so many other cities which are growing and really developing at a very fast pace. And for that, air travel and the different direct routes are really an opportunity. And we could see that correlation between, GDP times 2 in a growing market like ours roughly equals the market growth. And we could see the spin-off, and I think there has been some IATA studies done earlier, where every dollar invested in aviation yields $3 in overall economic spin-off. And we see that back in a lot of communities where we operate. And I think the same would go for employment, the same would go for investment, and all these things nicely tied together.
Now, with that demand you talk about, that will come from growth, if I could push you on, I know you haven't given capacity guidance officially, but could we at least see around a 20% similar figure growth in the next full year?
Well, then you know me well enough. If I don't give an official capacity guidance, I also will not give you an unofficial capacity guidance. So you get the very same answer. I think it's a little bit, I would like to step away from this quarter over quarter type of thing. We are putting a target to double in size towards the end of the decade. That's what we have announced earlier. Today, the Indian domestic market is some 150-ish million customer. It's expected to move to a total of 300 million customers by the end of the decade. Again, IndiGo aspires to double in size in that time frame. That's not just a plan, but that's backed up really by this massive fleet order which we're having. So we look to that 5-year trajectory. And today 100 million customer basis, double by the end of the decade. A growing international share. Today our ASK share is somewhere in the range of 25%. We expect that share of international travel only to grow. And again, being when India is home with many of these big cities, we have a great opportunity in operating out of different cities on new routes. And that's precisely what we're developing now.
Now, on the here and now, you've had quite a challenge with engines, Pratt & Whitney, and on the Airbus aircraft. Publicly, you've said you've had around 70 aircraft in the mid-70s that have been grounded at any one time. What is the situation like now, and how you are able to navigate some of these challenges?
Well, yeah, clearly for us it's a challenge we're having, but it's not a new challenge. We're dealing with that challenge basically for the last 4 to 5 quarters. What we have done is a whole range of mitigating measures in terms of lease extensions, bringing in some additional aircraft. And again, here, our steady flow of aircraft coming in is a good way to mitigate that. So despite these Pratt & Whitney challenges, we have been able to live up to our capacity guidance. That's also why we are very hesitant to give a capacity guidance now for next year. I just would like to make sure that we have all the measures and all the elements in place. And again, for the calendar year and even the fiscal year 23-24, we have been able to do so. So we continue with these mitigating measures, lease extensions, bringing in some temporary leases, having all the influx of new aircraft, and even we have a damp lease with 2 wide bodies in our operation, just to supplement that.
And when do you see the situation on the engine side getting better? Because we had some airlines say it could take until 2026 before, with the large Pratt & Whitney engine fleet to get back to normal. What about for you? Are you able to get engines through the shop quicker? What's the situation like?
Of course, we are in sort of permanent dialogue with Pratt & Whitney on what's the supply chain look like, what's the expectation look like, and how would that improve going forward. Again, here for us, the fact that each and every week we got a new plane coming in, next week, the week after, the month after, and that's for the years out, that is probably the best measure for us and the best cushion, if you wish, in order to make sure that we can live up to that capacity planning and can continue to expand in the way which we have been expanding. Because the demand in India will not slow down. It will just continue to grow. Again, economic outlook is what it is, 6 to 7%, multiplied by 2 plus a little bit, and you got pretty much the aviation outlook for growth, and that's from all these different cities. So we need really to have that capacity to address that growing demand.
Now, 1 aircraft a week in terms of delivery, is that, how is that going in terms of, given all the supply chain challenges, new aircraft delivery delays? It's been a common theme across the industry. Do you see any slippage in those timelines at the moment from what you're seeing?
No, for us, we're good in that stream of planes coming in. I think for us, we have and I'm really proud of that, we have a fantastic training academy. We train roughly 2,000 people a day. And again, India is a young and ambitious and extremely eager nation to learn and to move forward. So we train 2,000 people a day to make sure that all these planes can go into operation right away and enable us really to expand that network. That network today has 86 domestic destinations, 32, and actually since the announcement earlier this week of Bali, 33 international destinations. So we just continue to grow on that part.
And what is going to be the focus in terms of when you grow this year? Is it going to be more on the international side than domestic? Clearly domestic, you are so much more mature. You're very much in the market, but do you see the opportunity for international this year as the bigger priority?
Well, what we have said earlier, we will grow faster on the international side. So today, the international side is roughly 25% of our available seat kilometers. That percentage is growing up to 30%. By definition, that means that we have a stronger growth international. Having said that, we keep the momentum on the domestic side. And I mentioned earlier 19 flights a day between Delhi and Mumbai, 14 flights a day between Delhi and Bangalore. So we just continue to build that infrastructure. And therefore, I think if you see what's happening in India, and that's probably not happening anywhere else in the world, on that 19 flights a day between Delhi and Mumbai, you have a wonderful mixture, and if you wish, a reflection of the society. Business travel, family travel, first-time travelers. And you were referring earlier to India by IndiGo. I think we take a big pride of welcoming so many first-time flyers on board of the aircraft. And these are first-time flyers today. They'll be our frequent flyers for tomorrow.
Absolutely. And you talk about the diversity of customer traveler profiles. You do have narrow bodies in the main. Where do you stand on wide bodies? I mean, because you do have a huge order book, which I'm sure many airlines, even I'm sure Tony would love to grab a hold of. Yeah. Does wide bodies fall into the mix? We've heard you maybe talking on a wide body order and that called off. Where do you stand right now?
We have a little short of 1,960-ish narrow body planes on orders between today and the middle of the next decade. In that massive order book, we have a very sizable number of Airbus 321s XLRs. So that XLR will help us to further expand the range of the network we're operating today. So today we operate long flights like Delhi to Bali, Delhi to Istanbul, Mumbai to Nairobi. So we're already stretching that expansion. Recently, we opened direct flights into Baku, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty. So we're really expanding that part. The XLR will allow us to further expand it. I think that is where a lot of new opportunities will arise. And we're not ruling out anything for the future, but we're not making any comments or any predictions on that either.
No worries. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a big round of applause to Mr. Pieter Elbers, the CEO of IndiGo, for joining us on stage. Thank you.